and welcome to another episode of AML Grey Matters, a webinar where we explore various issues impacting AML compliance. Today is Wednesday, 20th July. My name is Kimberly Smith, and I'm a former compliance officer and MLRO and co-founder of Silo Compliance System, an AML regulatory management solution. I want to welcome our audience from all over the world, and especially to our Silo users. Today we'll be discussing the continuing raid to sanctions, and I welcome back Ulrich de La Paz, Sanctions Manager at a financial institution in Curacao. Welcome, Ulrich. How are you today?
Fine, thanks, and thanks again for having me on the AML Grey Matters. It's a pleasure, and we're going to have an interesting session today again, so I'll look forward for that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting update. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is actually the third webinar on sanctions we've done this year. We'll probably do another one later on in the year as this kind of landscape continues to change on us. But before we begin, a little housekeeping. I do want to remind our audience that this webinar is not legal advice. It is an open discussion, and we encourage your questions and comments as the webinar progresses. Certificates of attendance will be auto-generated to live attendees only and sent to you via email 1 hour after the end of the broadcast, and you may have to wait up to 24 hours as well. There is one handout today, and a recording of this broadcast will be sent out by the end of next week. I also want to apologize in advance if my energy wanes or my voice starts to go. I'm coming at you today from quarantine with a very ill husband. He's very sick with COVID symptoms, and he has tested positive. There's a new COVID variant that is highly infectious, and I do hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. So far, I'm doing okay, but I can feel my own energy waning at times. So I do apologize if I have to take a little break for some water. Also, for our last broadcast, we did a drawing for one of our Silo cooler bags, and we want to congratulate our latest winner based in Jersey. Congratulations, Ms. Hilton. I hope you received the bag in good time last month. We will draw another name later today from our live audience, and the winner will be notified and named in our next webinar as well. So let's begin. Ulrich, let's start with the struggles that you've been experiencing. Would you like to expand on what you've witnessed the past few months?
Yes, for sure. Let's start with this part. Basically, what we are seeing is the scrutinization basically of all payments from the correspondent bank. You see that, more and more they are coming back with questions, inquiring about certain payments because basically they want to make sure that there is no sanction evasion in that. And I'm not speaking specifically to payments going to maybe Ukraine or Russia. It's in payments in general. So you see that basically the correspondent banks are bolstering basically their filtering and screening of payments, whereby it can have a delay basically. And I can understand that, but on the other hand, the customers will not understand that. So in an advice basically for that, you see that more and more that you need to have like a very transparent reference. What are you paying? What are you receiving? Where it's going? You know, there whereby that the payment is so easily can be transacted more and effected and executed easily without going back, or and sometimes blocked or maybe stopped before it can be executed. That's what we are seeing basically what it is. And yeah, you see in the Caribbean we are right in the middle. Some of us need to deal with either the US dollars and euro payments. So you have sanctions from both sides that you need to deal with. So it's not getting easy, and more and more we are seeing the difficult part of it. That's
okay. And what tips do you have for those who are executing these transactions? Is it just to be more aware of the higher due diligence that the banks are going to have to require, be prepared to provide more information, more documentation?
Exactly. So basically, where you feel like, okay, there is a payment that being executed or needs to be executed, and you see that maybe the reference is not so clear. Um, it's good for to get a clear view of the payment, so the payment reference, where it's going. So maybe if it is going, let's just give an example. It goes to Russia, for instance. Okay, and
Okay.
it says it's an individual in Russia, but on the payment reference it says, okay, it's nowadays you will see it, family matters, or help of a family, or it says help of a friend. You know,
Mhm.
you need to go back to the to yeah. I assume these payments are for now are being stopped by your transaction filtering program. So in order for you to scrutinize this payment and look at it and go back to the customer or the originator of the payment and ask him, okay, what is the payment all about? What's the family relationship? Get some more details about the payment, because this payment might be stopped by the correspondent bank, and you will get questions and you still need to go back to the customer. So in advance, try to stop or have this payment stop in order to do some inquiries prior to executing. So this is basically my advice for this type of payments. For instance, going to Russia, to Ukraine, and even maybe payments going to either European countries or US from using the US dollar. And just pay attention and what's being mentioned and in the payment reference, because sometimes they can mention some things that these payments can be stopped. So and that's
Okay.
what we want to avoid.
Okay. Okay. If anybody has any other questions for you, or please do, feel free to post them. Now, in preparation for today's topic, Ulrich and I had also asked ourselves some deeper questions, and here's the ones that we kind of decided to pose to ourselves to see if we could answer them. I was most curious about question 2, how the sanctions are impacting, the smaller jurisdictions such as Cayman, BVI, Curacao, Mauritius, Isle of Man, all these, deemed, international financial centers. Also, question 3 was the one I was curious about, the impact on any regulated entities, not just financial institutions. So these would be the trust and corporate service providers, wealth and asset managers, trustees, things like that. So please, those of you who are in those industries, please feel free to post your comments about how you guys have been impacted. And again, so please do feel free to take a look at these. And I'm going to address too, like the number 4, the number of assets frozen. I did find some data about that as well.
Kimberly,
In the meantime, yeah, I'm just kind of looking at the comments box. Khalil, I do see yours. I'm going to address your question about the impact of sanctions on the Russian economy later. I've got a few slides that might kind of help that will bring up that discussion. Neil, he's asking Ulrich, he says, what responsibility do we have to investigate payments to third parties other than customers or clients, for example, service providers, and whether they or the UBO of those parties could be subject to sanctions? Let me see if I could kind of rephrase that. What responsibility do we have to investigate payments? So I'm assuming, Neil, if you don't mind, just kind of saying, are you with the bank or some other type of institution? I'm assuming you're coming from a bank, but what are you? What's your experience from a financial institution, Ulrich? Are you having to investigate the recipients of funds?
No, not in fact, but you want to know actually the relationship between your customer and the beneficiary. So
Okay.
that you are making sure that you did your due diligence, and in fact you are feeling comfortable that you are not dealing with like yeah maybe a person that maybe is working or fronting for a Russian, in this case for a Russian or a Ukraine. maybe that is sanctioned. You never know. Okay, so
Okay.
that's what you are doing nowadays. So
All right. So Neil says he's an insolvency practitioner, so he's having to make payments from estates to various types of parties. Yeah, my advice is that, yeah, Neil, you would have to do some level of due diligence. Whether or not you have to do actual KYC. Ooh, that's a good question. It's my understanding you would have to actually get some KYC, such as IDs, copies of IDs to those third parties that you're making the payments to.
it depends, Kimberly. It depends basically what type of payment it is, what is the profile of your customer too.
Yeah,
Because if your customer are used to do certain payments that's you're comfortable with already,
yeah,
and all of a sudden does another payment, that is where you need to open your eyes and say, oh, okay, this is not a normal payment. So
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
we need to
Well,
do
and
something.
two, I think just, the bare minimum would be just to run those names through sanctions list,
Exactly.
and make sure that you're not, sending payments to somebody who is on a sanctions list, or who
Exactly.
is a close associate of these PEPs. Although, I think with liquidation, it's kind of,
Yeah.
pretty standard. That's the bare minimum I would do.
But at
Okay.
the end of the day, if your filtering program is working properly, we will cover that maybe in the later stage too. Yeah,
Mhm.
that is why you supposedly those payments has to be stopped if you are dealing maybe for a fronting guy or a sanctioned party. So that is
Okay.
where, yeah, your payment filtering program needs to be updated on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so our current landscape. So, EU countries have frozen 14 billion. That's with a B. In sorry, apologize for the typo there. Oligarch assets, and 20 billion in central bank reserves. And I was also reading a article that in late June, the U.S. Department of Justice, they said they've frozen more than 30 billion, again with a B, of oligarch assets, and froze about 300 billion of Moscow's central bank funds. Now, Ulrich, one of our questions was, how many assets have been frozen in the Caribbean region? I was not able to find any figures, setting that out in the Caribbean. There was a New York Times article from 13th of April, so a few months ago, saying that Cayman had reported 7.3 billion, again with a B, in assets belonging to Russians. That amount had been frozen, so that's a pretty significant amount. And of course, we see here that authorities in Jersey said that they had also frozen over 7 billion just in assets linked to Roman Abramovich. So I don't know if that was, mostly the football club or not, but and that is from a 12th July article, so a very recent one. And note at the bottom, that article, the header, the headline is Switzerland, a playground of Russian oligarchs emerges as sanctions weak link. I know a lot of kind of Caribbean regions have to, do business with, Swiss, nominees and Swiss banks, and hit a lot of walls there. So that I want to just kind of say you might have to be very, very careful when you're dealing with Swiss uh, intermediaries on behalf of your clients, just to kind of keep yourself clean.
Uh, and Kimberly, I just wanted to add to that, based on your remark, it's not mentioned that basically not all Caribbean islands have published the frozen assets. So I know that Cayman did. In the earlier session that I had at Bahamas, it was mentioned also, but there I didn't see that it was published. So um, uh, what I can tell you is we are we are seeing basically the ones that the most biggest countries are publishing, but we are speaking only about billions. But if we continue further, it might be that we can reach trillions too. So instead of the B, it's gonna be a 3R. So
Yeah.
million.
Okay. Yeah. Moving on. Again, current landscape. So grain exports out of Ukraine and Russia are looking very close to resuming. There's been some talks this past week, some UN-led negotiations being mediated by Turkey, could end a months-long Russian blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports that has cut off the export route for Ukraine. As most of you know, Ukraine is one of the world's leading grain producers, and that blockade has threatened the global food crisis. I'm sure we've all experienced the rising food prices. I know we have here in the US. Also, on 12th of July, the UK's National Crime Agency and Office of Financial Sanctions implementation, I think it's part of the HM Treasury, they issued a red alert, and it's titled Financial Sanctions Evasion Typologies, Russian Elites and Enablers. This is a 15-page document, and 3 of those pages are the handout. So again, please take a moment to download those relevant pages. And I'm going to show you some of those items listed in the next few slides. Now, for those of you who don't know, I've come from a corporate services background, fiduciary services background. These were some of the red flags for evasion typologies that I thought, okay, yeah, that, these can be helpful. Obviously, anybody who's reducing their share ownership below any particular thresholds, anybody who's transferring their ownership to a new owner, but that new owner is secured, the payment secured by a loan to the former equity owners. Those are some red flags. They're also kind of looking at any transfer of ownership of companies to third-party jurisdictions, and I put in quotes, including countries that offer citizenship by investment schemes. Those are those CIP programs. So those are probably going to go under the microscope as well. And of course, any kind of transfer of beneficial ownership to non-Russian or dual national family members or associates. And I put in red here the prior to or shortly after sanctions taking effect. Now, it was raised in one of the previous webinars that we had, where somebody was saying, oh, we had a transfer of assets before the sanctions took effect. And I do remember kind of going, well, if it was before sanctions, it was okay. And I think it had been something like, months before, not just, days before.
Correct, yes.
And I think that prior to, you're going to have to, if you do find yourself in this situation, you're going to have to look at the case and say, look, was this months? Was this before the invasion? Was this before the threat of sanctions? Or was the threat of sanctions there when the asset transfer happened? So you might have to kind of look into those cases more deeply and on a case-by-case basis.
Kimberly, I just want to add to that. You might be indeed. You might. I would advise basically to go back to look at that transaction or to look at that change in ownership for sure, and to see what was the reason for it. In fact, so maybe they were being targeted already, and they decided. So that some of those oligarchs did do some changes. Transfer their assets to their children and then change it back or to somebody else, and therefore you see also that for sure in the EU sanctions are going more and more to more individuals and entities, because they are seeing this type of sanction evasion typologies, whereby assets are supposedly sold to another individual while it is just fronting, and in that case you will see that more and more the list of individual sanctions are growing, and that is where you need to be careful by seeing these type of assets transfer or sold to other individuals.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree. Okay, here are some of the typologies that red alert lists to detect suspicious payments. Now, Ulrich, what are your thoughts on this little list here that they provided? And of course, this is not the full list. So again, remember, get that handout and print it up, and even pull the full document. You can Google it. But what are your thoughts on this list, Ulrich?
It's the only the five that you mentioned here are already extensive. So 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 if you see the magnitude of these types of suspicious payments, it's basically for a financial institution is where you need to look for. You know, where do you need to dig? Based on the question, okay, do you have to investigate the payments? How far should you go? You know, and but at the end of the day, it goes back to the first slide, saying, okay, changes that are being made basically in this type of so-called Russian investments are fronting Russian investors and so on. So for financial institutions, even not only financial institutions, also for trust service providers and all those, you need to, you know, because transactions are flowing through them too, as directors and manager directors, or maybe supervisory director, you never know what's your involvement in these type of entities. It's whereby where you need to look for. Okay, if you
Okay.
if you just see like payments received by UK businesses, the fourth point there, payments received by UK businesses often in innovative areas such as fintech. You know, you see that more and more, yeah, they need to look for other alternatives in order to get either push their money out of Russia, or the money that they have maybe or somewhere else in the world that they need to move that, because yeah, they're still in Russia, but they need some cash, and yeah, it's not coming in. And if you see more and more that sanctions are coming also against more and more of those banks in Russia and Ukraine, it's making it more difficult for these so-called billionaires, because today most of their assets are frozen, that to get their money. So and it makes it also difficult for other institutions in order to deal with these type of so-called suspicious payments. You know, it's not that you're
Okay.
gonna be paranoid, but again, you need to scrutinize. You need to go dig a little bit further.
Okay. Um, what I found interesting is the reference. Well, a few things I found interesting. One was the reference to the former Soviet Union.
Yeah,
So they're not just focusing on Russia. And for again, the Soviet Union fell in 1991. That's 30 years ago. That's before some of our audience members were even born. There's like 15 countries that was part of the Soviet Union, and that includes like Uzbekistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. So it's not just Russia and Belarus and Ukraine. Even Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. So the authorities seem to be, wanting to kind of focus on that whole region. Another one that I found was interesting was they're talking about jurisdictions and FATF identified AML deficiencies.
yeah.
And again, as of June 17th, like Cayman, fell into that. Nicaragua, Pakistan, Panama, those were, there's a long list of those as well. And of course, and they're also talking about, any countries that support or even have stayed neutral to the Russian aggression as well. And that, that includes like Cuba, Nicaragua, and
That
Venezuela.
that that I think we need to look at the Soviet Union. You know, because most of
Mhm.
those former Soviet Union countries, they're kind of in the middle. You know, are they supporting Russia or not? So
Yeah. So it's more than that. And then the other part that I found very interesting is this payments that via that fintech
yeah,
with the Russian investor. Now, for those of you who are not in the kind of the tech world or the startup world, fintechs have been the darling for investors the past few years. And this is a graph showing the number of fintech startups. So these are just the startups. These are the ones that just started in 2018, the ones that started in 2019 and 2020 and 2021. And of course, this is by region. And so again, you can see, there's thousands of these. And for those who don't know, fintechs can be like cryptocurrency exchanges, prepaid credit cards. They're any kind of financial technology. It's what the fintech stands for. That helps, processing of payments and helps banks, like even like QR code payment platforms. And so being able to recognize what a fintech is and doing your due diligence, going, drilling down to see if any of that fintech who is your customer or your payer or, a beneficiary, making sure that they are not owned by Russians. So you're gonna have to do your due diligence there. I'm just going to go back to that other slide as well that we just had, suspicious of things. And then of course the other one was that venture capital and private equity vehicles. Now, I mean, in Cayman, that's that's quite a bit, the private equity funds. So again, it's just going to be all I can say is it's just not business as usual anymore. You're gonna have to do some major due diligence, on your clients and your payers. And again, I can see lots of questions and lots of comments coming through. So I will kind of pause here for a moment and see what's somebody writes down, they're talking about wallets, those cryptocurrency wallets. You have to be very careful about those.
Yeah.
Somebody is asking, Severio, he's asking, what is ownership secured by loan to former equity owners? And that goes back to that slide back here. See, this is, I think he's talking about here. This is where if you're somebody is transferring the beneficial ownership or any level of ownership, but to acquire that ownership of the company or the shares, they are doing it by getting a loan from the previous owners, and so there's still some control by that previous owner. So that is what that is referring to.
Yep.
Somebody else is asking, Eamon, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, saying, should financial institutions lower their thresholds below the minimum required by the regulating authorities in order to capture those financial criminals that may be deliberately lowering their transactions to not trigger alerts or tickets? I think that's kind of pretty already kind of looked at. What's your impression on that, Ulrich?
It's basically it depends on your institution as well, how many risks you want to how much risk you want to take,
Yeah.
And by lowering the threshold, basically you might be getting more hits. So can you deal with all those hits? And in fact, basically, okay, when getting all those hits, can you tie them back, for instance, to any so-called individuals are doing structuring or using small payments in order to not to be detected? So it can be in your payment monitoring system or screening system. It can be also in your if you are using a transaction monitoring system, you can build up rules also in order to catch that maybe on a weekly basis or monthly basis. So that's also an advice to do that instead of catching that, because when you're dealing with the transaction filtering system, it's single transactions. You might be getting that maybe in a transaction monitoring program whereby you reviewed all the customer payments on a weekly or monthly basis.
Okay.
That's also a possibility.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking, I think really what the kind of the different governments are trying to really go after, they're trying to go after the big money.
Exactly.
That's my kind of theory. That's the reason why they're kind of going after the big trade financing deals, the the $100,000 payments, not the $5,000 and $10,000 payments. I think I'm not saying ignore those smaller transfers of funds, but they're definitely looking after the bigger. They want the big fish. Is my thing.
A big amount too. So
yeah. Okay. Another aspect of that red alert is the detection of enablers. Now, and I think the biggest takeaway here today is that it's simply, again, it's just not business as usual anymore for fiduciary service providers, and especially anyone who has to be sorry, kind of losing my train of thought here, but yeah, it's not business as usual for fiduciary service providers anymore, and everyone's gonna have to be very careful and highly organized to avoid becoming an enabler or being accused of being an enabler and facing those fines or any kind of prosecution in the future. And I don't think those fines are, well, the fines are probably going to happen this year and next if you do have any kind of deficiencies in your systems. But I think it's going to be a very frustrating few years ahead because none of this is going to go away by the end of this year, I don't think. I mean, if anything, it's going to kind of continue to escalate as lines are drawn between the East and the West and Europe and the Eastern Europe countries. Yeah, so I think everybody's just going to be very, very careful, continue to monitor, continue to look at your clients and review them. So it's kind of like much like the ongoing COVID waves. We just need to be very careful to not get too comfortable with our intermediaries, with our clients, especially the long-term clients that maybe we've kind of been doing business with them for years and years. But, keep making sure that you're masking up and social distancing, so to speak. But these are some of the kind of red flags that they were kind of listing in that red alert. So take a moment, and for those of you who are asking about slides, yes, the slides are available. You'll have to email me separately because often I can't get them attached to kind of mass emails. So whenever we do send out the recording, I will try to send a copy of the slides, but if the email won't let me attach it because it's too large, I'll put my email address so you can respond, ask for it. So feel free to get these slides. But again, this is all part of this red alert. You can also Google 0697-NECC, and that will bring up this particular red alert as well. So if you need to get that. But it seems to be for the detection of enablers. It's really, they're just kind of they're looking more closely at nominees and trust service providers. And I know in the Caribbean there's a lot of you that provide those services. So you want to, DP, by the way, it stands for designated persons. So those are the ones who are sanctioned. And so of course, for those of you that are in that industry, you're going to have to be very, very careful to not be kind of deemed an enabler. So please review your company client portfolios carefully. Another update is the millionaire migration, especially out of Russia. Now, this is a great visual aid to show the numbers of kind of migration that's kind of going out of Russia to China and Hong Kong. And of course, in the green is where they're going. And I think they were saying pretty much the UAE is, let me see if I can find it, Saudi Arabia, UAE was kind of Singapore, Israel, Greece, Portugal, Switzerland. This is where they're going for the most part. So I just thought that was very interesting. And of course, there was also a June article about Russia hemorrhaging their high net worth individuals as they try and protect their assets. Sorry, did you have something to say?
Yes, I just wanted you to just go back to that previous slide and to look at it. It's remarkable to see where the millions are, where migration is going, the big red, the big red one. So China, Hong Kong, and you do not see anything going to the West, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, a little bit to the UK. And yeah, oh no, sorry, even UK, they're even saying that they're migrating out. Sorry, that's kind of confusing. But yeah, they're not really going to Europe. Yeah, so it seems to be going Middle East and as well. So it's kind of interesting.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to keep an eye on that.
Oh yes.
But yeah, this was another good article. And of course, and they defined, what is a high net worth individual? It's more than $1 million. And so yeah, a really good article. And again, that particular article, it did say, it said that the UAE was the most favorable destination for high net worth Russians, along with Europe, the US, and it does say here, and Europe. So of course, there's a link to that article as well, if you want to. With this current landscape, now this is where I'm curious. I think this begs the question for our audience: are you onboarding more Russian nationals than before? And if so, how are you treating your current Russian national clients. So if we can take a moment, Tom, if you don't mind launching that particular poll. Sorry, I do apologize in advance if this. Okay, yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong slide here. I think the poll question was if you're onboarding or retaining your Russian nationals, how are you risk rating them? So this is just wanted to get some feedback here. So what's your experience? Are you kind of treating anything that's going to or from Russia just higher risk?
Yes. Oh, yes. So that's definitely basically all three countries were basically flagged, and yeah, it's basically a mandate also from the regulators also in order for you to just pay attention and doing some additional review on payments coming in and going out.
Okay.
At a certain point, basically what you need to do is you never know. In the past, maybe you didn't even know that there were payments going to Russia or to Ukraine because you do not think, for instance, that maybe you have that in your customer database, or even maybe your customer dealing with Russia or Ukraine. But after the sanctions, you will get notice that yeah, surprisingly, that still there are business being done with Russia and Ukraine. So, and that is where you need to scrutinize these payments, stop these payments in order to review them, make sure that they are not in compliance with the sanctions, or there is no sanction evasions, which payment is allowed according to licenses that are provided. So all those things you need to review before executing. So that is by going to your basically to your customer database also to see where maybe there is like sanction parties that maybe you need to be assets that needs to be frozen. So that's also a test that you need to do.
Okay. Tom, if you want to go ahead and show the results of that poll. So I see that 53% are making all Russian nationals higher risk.
Yep.
That's very interesting. Only 15% are making only your PEPs and associates of PEPs higher risk, and 12% are saying you're using another kind of hybrid risk assessment method. So it seems like most of you are being extremely careful, or maybe you're being required to under your by your regulator. So
And Kimberly, we go back to the previous session that we had there where we said also it's not you don't need to make all Russian nationals high risk, for instance, and you need to look at what are their dealings, who they're dealing with, and so on. So it's not one size fits all.
Okay. And Tom, I think we had one other poll. If you want to go ahead and share the next poll as well. Yeah, and this is about what do you is your company what are you doing with your current Russian clients? Are you de-risking them, re-risking them? Are you onboarding more than before? So I'm curious. I personally would at least re-risk existing pre-existing Russian national UBOs and clients or customers. I wouldn't necessarily find it a requirement to de-risk, which it's for those who are unsure what I mean by that. That is, in other words, fire those Russian clients or customers, basically closing down their accounts or saying we won't do business with you anymore. I wouldn't do that. I'm personally one of those that's kind of against painting all individuals from the same nationality with the same brush.
Yes, exactly.
I don't think that's our job. I think our job is to risk assess, not just to risk avoid.
Yeah.
No, so yeah, so it looks like, yeah, if you want to go ahead and close that poll, Tom, and show the results. So it looks like 63% of you are like me, you're just re-risking your Russian national clients. Only 12% are showing that you are completely de-risking, and maybe maybe that fits your line of work. Maybe you're kind of saying, look, we're just not willing to risk it, and so for some of you that's perfectly acceptable. So,
And you just have to take into consideration also. It depends also what are the your regulators are telling you. It even
yeah.
can go back to your correspondent bank. You know, a couple of years ago that we had like some correspondent banks were telling, okay, we do not want you to deal with Venezuelan nationals. Otherwise, we need to close those accounts. You know, so
Hmm.
you never know where it can go if it continues like this. You know that maybe correspondent will tell you, okay, you need to get rid of all those Russian nationals or customers in your database. So
Hmm. Yeah.
it can go
Okay.
further.
Okay. I'm going to move. You can go ahead and close that polling question, Tom. Thank you. I'm going to move on here. So the next slide, it was just, again, this is just an article from July 11th talking about how there's some wheat export problems, and basically due to logistics and trade finance problems. For those of you who don't know, I did do a webinar. I don't. Well, first of all, let me ask you, Ulrich, are you kind of are you familiar with trade financing?
So
Sorry,
I lost.
are you still there, Ulrich?
Yes, I'm here. I thought I lost you for a moment. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but are you kind of familiar with trade financing transactions?
Yes, I'm familiar. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because that could be, I know that that's a pretty complex,
Oh
the
yes.
whole trade finance transaction, very, very complex.
There,
Um,
there, there's where you need to. Yeah. There's another yeah, so-called risk coming. It's
mhm.
proliferation financing. There's where you need to look at that too.
Yeah,
Risk.
and
Related
I
to
would definitely
bank.
recommend for anybody who's not familiar with trade financing, and you're especially if you're in the banking industry, financial institution, go get some training, because that's pretty complex and it's very interesting, and that's how the big money I think is being kind of laundered, and will probably be the way to get through. And of course, obviously, they're kind of saying, this the exports of the wheat, are kind of slowed down because of that trade financing issues. But of
Yeah.
course, again, we are hoping that those ports do open up as well. And another one, a few of you have been asking questions about the freezing of sanctions. Let me see if I can go find the one. Somebody had posted a very good comment or question. See if I can find it here. Yeah, what will happen? This is from Deepak. I'm sorry if I'm again pronouncing your name incorrectly. It says, what will happen with the frozen or seize of assets with respect to a secondary sanction placed by OFAC? And what if the Russian entities wants to contest the frozen assets, and who's going to bear the cost? So now I don't know about bearing the cost. Well, probably the Russian national will bear the cost, and the country. But there was a great article in The Economist. I think it was June 9th, 2022, talking about why the West should be wary of permanently seizing Russian assets. Now, I did look into it, and in the US, the president has the authority to freeze but not seize
Exactly.
assets unless America is at war with that country.
Yep.
And war has not been declared. We apparently, from what I understand, we're not even in open conflict with Russia, and we're not seeking according to what I hear on the news, we're not seeking a regime change. So we cannot, in the US, they cannot seize those assets. Now, and I mentioned this in a previous webinar on sanctions, that we are kind of saying, I did anticipate that I think there's going to be lots of court cases where the Russian nationals who do have their assets frozen are going to contest them, because there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry.
Basis maybe.
Well, yeah, it's just like, the governments can just say, okay, we're freezing this assets. That they haven't been convicted by a court. Due process, that's the word I'm looking for. And so this article is a very good one about why this particular author is kind of saying it's not a good idea. And I think the number one fear would be that tit for tat so that other governments would say, oh, well, we're going to start seizing US owned or UK owned assets. And I think we've even seen some of the impact of that with when it comes to airplanes.
In fact, the Russia did put some sanctions against certain U.S. individuals. So,
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I did definitely saw that. So again, this is a really good article or topic you want to look into as well. Yeah, so again, it's just a very interesting time we are living in right now. I'm going to go through some of these questions again, see if there's anything I can. All right, so Khalil, you've written about, you asked, what's the impact of sanctions on the Russian economy? I'm not an economist, and it has been fantastic I mean, like I said, just so interesting to watch all of this unfold the past, 4 or 5 months from I should say, from a very safe region, I might add. Probably not so interesting for others. It's just in the past few days, I've just thought it's been fascinating to watch how Putin has been, working, he's had that meeting with Iran. He's in talks with, letting Turkey kind of do some mediation. I think obviously the impact on the Russian economy is going to be hard. I wouldn't be surprised though if they're going to find ways through this. And I think the big winner, if I'm again, I'm no economist, I think the big winner in all this is probably going to be Africa, because I can see a lot of transactions starting to, or investments from the Eastern European countries who now are going to be blocked from investing in Europe and in the US. They're just going to take their money and start investing in Africa. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Ulrich?
Definitely, there will be some other, big countries will be our continent being, having the advantage of all those sanctions against Russia. The shifting you will see maybe in maybe in a short while, maybe at the end of the year, that you see. It depends what are the products and services that can be provided also in that particular part of the world. In Africa, you see that more and more they are getting more, producing more, but there are certain products that cannot be produced there, like for instance grain and so on. So, or at least not in a big picture,
Yeah.
And the big amounts and so on. So, I personally think that there might be some shifting, but on the other hand, you will see also that more and more, and that the U.S. or the West, the ones countries putting those sanctions, will look after at ending this try to end this war, and for the economy to move, because they are feeling also the impact of the economy. So it's not only Russia, but other parts of the world are feeling the impact. So if you see gas prices, you know, food products and all those things, we are feeling that too. So I personally think that there you will see a shifting to other countries, but there will be an effort done in order to end these sanctions too, not in full,
Yeah.
or at least in a way that the economy can go on the trails again. So that's what
Yeah.
I
Yeah, yeah, and Brendan, he comments, he says the ruble's stunning surge in the following months is being cited by the Kremlin as proof that Western sanctions aren't working. Russia's ruble hit its strongest level in 7 years despite massive sanctions. I think, and he's absolutely, and Brendan, you're absolutely right. It's one of those things, I think in 5-10 years, we'll look back at this period of history and say, did sanctions work? And I wouldn't be surprised if our answer to that is no. It could.
but let's be honest to each other, Kimberly. We are seeing right now that it's not working, basically. So
yeah, it's not working now. And the challenge that we're facing though is the Caribbean region, anybody who's in the international financial industry, we're in the crossfires, and that's, we've got to find a way to stay safe while this is kind of ongoing. And
Exactly.
this is going to be a really challenging time for us to make sure that we're not accused of being enablers, that we're not accused of helping those that evade sanctions or turning a blind eye, especially with the FATF, having so many of our smaller jurisdictions on AML deficiency lists and things like that. And of course, as a company manager, you may be trying to a company owner, you're trying to make sure you're avoiding getting fined by your regulator.
But I think the regulators also are seeing this type of movement from the FATF and other things, and they are moving ahead also in order to protect their financial system and those other institutions. So basically, I think the role of the regulators it's very important in order to protect not only the institutions, the financial institutions and other type of institutions, the whole country, basically, our island. So
yeah. And somebody comments, Muthani comments, she agrees. Sorry. Yeah, I agree on the comment about Africa in terms of becoming the focus for investments, and also because it is rich in natural resources. Absolutely. In which case, can we say that African countries need to keep an eye on diversion of the funds by sanctioned individuals into the African economy? I mean, so. Yeah, I do think you should. Now, I think each, is that African country that you're in obligated to, I guess if you're dealing with US dollars and euros, of course, yes, you're going to need to make sure you're not dealing with the sanctioned individual by the EU or by the US or the UK. Yeah, I would just kind of be very careful, but I do think Africa is definitely going to be the winner. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and for sure you need to look. These people will look for maybe less regulated countries also in order to do their things, because if you are dealing in dollars and euros, you know that you need to comply with certain things. But maybe in the other type of currencies, you are allowed maybe to do certain transactions. That's basically it.
Okay. Some of these questions are very good. And again, not being an economist, I can't answer the questions, but they're very challenging and kind of make you think. Somebody says, how will the recession impact sanctions next year? And I personally think we'll probably see a lot of carve-outs just to make sure that gas continues to flow, and payments for gas continues to flow. I think we'll see a lot of carve-outs in that area. I also do see that there's going to be I don't think we're going to have as many sanctions, new sanctions in the next year, as much as they're going to just focus on prosecuting those who have helped evade sanctions. I do see that kind of being the issue.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we're getting close to the top of the hour, and so I just wanted to kind of show some of the compliance tips for those of you who are compliance officers or managing directors of your regulated entities. So these are just kind of the things that I was thinking of for just get that CDD. Somebody has pointed out that they said that sometimes they just find it really hard to find out who's the beneficial owner of a client or customer. And this is the hardest part. I mean, I've been in that situation too, where you kind of hit this wall. And my advice would be, do not let up. If you have to, down pencils and not provide them with the service, not allow the transaction to proceed until you break through that wall, that's what you're going to have to do. And I would also, and this is really hard for the smaller firms, especially whenever you rely so much on like one person to do all your onboarding and your KYC. get a second person to sign off. I know not all of you have these large compliance teams, but do get that two-person sign off.
Kimberly, even maybe, get somebody, an external person to just take a look at your database, so are your customers, the customers that you did onboard. So maybe because it is a small, indeed, you said it is a small company, maybe they do not have the funds actually to have two persons working there. But yeah, at the end of the day, you need to have some level of comfortability that, okay, you are doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And even for those of you who are kind of going, oh, that's just a lot of money. Think of it as an investment to protect yourself from fines later. Protect your revenues there. So yeah, get your outside compliance consultants. Most of the smaller jurisdictions definitely have consulting firms and AML risk advisory providers. I would, it's like I said, just defend yourself and get your audits done, and maybe get that second person to sign off, even if it's from somebody from outside that you retain. And again, it's the old rules no longer apply. There's no such thing as standard KYC anymore. I'm not saying you have to do enhanced due diligence on everybody, but just make sure you're not ticking the boxes and moving on. But I've been kind of preaching that for years now. Make sure you're signing up for FinCEN and other regulatory alerts, and you are searching those customer and client databases. And and of course, and I mentioned earlier, I'm not a de-risker. But if you hit those walls and you can't figure out who your UBOs are, or these transactions, or these clients, then yes, de-risk and submit those SARs. I know a lot of people are kind of hesitant to submit SARs unless they're absolutely certain, but I would go forward to that. Just looking at a few more questions or comments. Oh, Karen, you always ask the really good detailed ones. Thoughts on whether the UK will strictly follow Article 5M of the EU regulations number 833-2014, the provision of fiduciary service. Sorry, Karen, I am not particularly versed in that particular article. I can't answer that.
Yeah, we can.
I think I need to have you as a guest one day. I have to look into that. And here's another one. How shall company service providers, this is from Katuna, how shall company service providers react if they find their clients UBO under awaiting sanctions on internet? Now, so I'm assuming that means like they're under the threat of sanctions, but they have not been sanctioned. Very carefully is my thing. So of course that goes back to that one typology where if that client is suddenly transferring assets, you need to be very careful, I think. Yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I can answer.
But there is, just to go back to that one. You're first of all, you're dealing with a shell company,
Okay.
So that is where already you have a kind of a risk. So you need to be a little bit more vigilant there when you are dealing with these type of entities. So.
Okay. Karen did explain a little bit more about that EU regulation. She says this means they will prohibit persons from acting as or arranging for another person to act as a trustee, nominee, shareholder, director, secretary, or similar position for a Russian trust or any similar legal arrangement. And of course, the earlier question was, how, was it going to be? Let me see if I can find the original question again. How strictly, basically on how strictly will they follow the UK follow that? I wouldn't be surprised if they follow that very strictly. Maybe not right away, but yeah, I can see that being a case where that's going to be banned. Let's look back, 20 years ago when we had bearer shares. Now suddenly bearer shares are illegal in most questions. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case in a few more years, where nominee directorships and share, acting as a nominee shareholder. I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes illegal in the future. Uh,
I think they're just given the leeway basically that you can basically put everything together
mhm.
because it's gonna be basically a mandate in the near future. So
Yeah, yeah. Another question is on simplified due diligence. You know, previously, if a company was, or I say previously, but currently, you know, if a company is regulated or listed on a stock exchange, what do we need to do? Anything more than to document proof? Me being particularly cautious, I would want to see if there's any major shareholders. Let's take, you know, Elon Musk as an example. You know, if he was a Russian national, he's not, but you know, if he was, but yet he is often a 9 or 10% majority shareholder. I would start looking at, you know, is there any one person who is a majority shareholder, especially if it's, you know, recently listed. Obviously, if it's, you know, thousands and thousands of shareholders and a pretty, one of those kind of companies. But I would look at your non-standard stock exchanges. You know, those companies who are, you know, I'm not talking about the New York Stock Exchange, but you know, some of these smaller jurisdiction stock exchanges. I would kind of look at those a little bit more closely.
but
And
the thing is, Kimberly, also if you see yeah in with these listed billionaires, there were some of them that were not basically mentioned in yeah on the stock exchange, so register.
yeah,
But because of the news, it was known basically that there were a shareholder or and a potential shareholder, maybe not with 50% or more than 25%, but there were actually shareholders also from certain companies that
yeah,
in certain countries there were closed also, or they had to close down.
okay. All right, everyone, we're at the top of the hour. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of the questions, but I do want to thank you for sharing your questions. I will review them probably later this weekend, all of them, see if I can answer them in my LinkedIn posts and as well. Thank you for sharing your comments. Thank you for joining us. Before we go, I just want to let everybody know, please, again, if you're not already following us on LinkedIn, follow Silo Compliance, and I am, you know, part of Silo Compliance. So you'll find me through that. Go ahead and connect with Ulrich de la Paz and Thomas Gardner, who works diligently behind the scenes with us. Thank you very much, Tom. Also, thank you for all of those who shared the webinar. I mean, just so you know, we had over 1,200 registered for today's webinar. So keep sharing it. It really does help. I think, you know, I get a lot of great feedback from people telling me how useful they find these kind of discussions and sharing comments and stuff. So again, keep sharing that. And of course, we will do another drawing today, and I'll announce it in that follow-up email as well. Now, I am going to take a break in August. We won't be doing a webinar, an AML Grey Matters webinar in August. I will pick back up in September. So again, just go ahead and follow and you will be notified when we get our next topic and date and things. I'm also sharing on this slide the different sources that I've kind of used. And of course, I was using, you know, quoting my sources at the bottom of certain slides as well. But if you wanted to look at any of those take a deeper dive into those, please do so. And again, whenever you get the recording, my email will be at the bottom for those of you who want to get a copy of the slides, and I'll be happy to flip those over to you at any time. Again, we do like to kind of just share some different technical solutions for those of you who are looking for kind of, you know, help with all the different compliance. So here's a list, you know, ourselves, Silo, there's breach bits for pen testing for those who are worried about cybersecurity. There's Robust, which is a data privacy governance solution as well. We have done a webinar on that. And of course, there's various options on name screening and sanction screening, as well as transaction monitoring. And again, just email me if you're looking for these kind of solutions, and I'll give you the details of those providers for those who need to know more. So Ulrich, I want to thank you again for joining us today. I think it's again one of these interesting times of history. Good luck on your job. I would not want to be in your position as a sanctions manager.
It's again, it's my pleasure, Kimberly. So I do it. You know, whenever you call on me, I'm there. So I'm there to
Absolutely.
support also. And I want to say, if any of the audience also wants to connect, feel free. No worries. We are here to support. We are looking for the same cause. So we are here to support the whole Caribbean and in order to do the right and create the awareness, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the Caribbean's going to be fine. That was kind of one of our questions at the earlier, what's the impact going to be? Again, we're in the crossfires, but I think ultimately we're going to be fine if we kind of, watch each other's backs, take care of yourselves, just be careful. It's a minefield out there. Stay safe,
Yep.
both from COVID and from sanctions and reputational risks.
You keep
So again, thank you. And Ulrich, while we're here, are there any conferences coming up that you would encourage people to attend, or
Yes,
anything that
there is.
you're kind of aware of?
From what I know, there is CRCA coming up in November. Um,
Okay.
um, there's also the Caribbean Conference of ACAMS also in December. So that's the
Okay.
virtual one. The CRCA one will be in person. That will be in Bahamas. So feel free to just look for crcaconference.com and you will get the details about that.
Okay. And you said ACAMS Caribbean, that's going to be virtual?
That's going to be virtual. Yes, that will be in December. Yes.
Okay. So, okay. Fantastic. All right. So hopefully we'll see some of you guys there. And again, so thank you, Ulrich, for that. And to our audience, again, I know your time is so valuable, so thank you for spending some time with that with us today. I do hope you found today's broadcast informative and can give you some practical advice to help you strengthen your AML programs and keep you and your organization safe from the current sanctions landscape. I also hope, again, that you and your families are staying safe from COVID and that you remain healthy. Please remember this BA.5 virus is going around, so please do what you can to avoid this new variant. And in the meantime, if anyone's looking at compliance systems, I do encourage you to stay on to watch a short 2-minute video and learn more about Silo. It's an AML regulatory management system. I am a co-founder. And it's helping our users efficiently manage all of their client due diligence and reduce their risk of regulatory fines. So until September, thank you again. This is Kimberly Smith signing off.
Anti-money laundering compliance and customer and vendor onboarding involves multiple processes that must be done correctly and by the right people in the most efficient way. The tasks include gathering customer and vendor ID and verification documents, screening against sanctions and politically exposed persons lists, analyzing any reputational risk, periodic monitoring to assess any changes and updating due diligence, and staff training on money laundering, terrorist financing, bribery and corruption awareness and risks, as well as keeping them up to date on your policies and procedures and new regulatory requirements. In addition to the onboarding processes being strictly followed and documented, management must have access to critical compliance metrics and information to steer the company through regulatory waters and mitigate customer and other risks. With Silo Compliance System, these obligations become much more efficient. With Silo, your staff can enter the customer's information and upload due diligence documents and any other documents that you require. Key information entered about your customer automatically calculates a risk score, a calculation using a risk-based approach determined by you at initial implementation of Silo. In addition, if you have screening enabled, when the customer's name is first entered into Silo, the name is checked against sanctions, politically exposed persons lists, and adverse media. You'll see results of screening immediately and can review any potential hits right away. And with screening enabled, your customers and vendors are continuously monitored for any sanctions advisories, helping you get ahead of any potential reputational risks. No company is too small to benefit from using Silo. Even if your onboarding processes seem under control today, if one key staff member becomes unavailable or there is any increase in your customer portfolio, compliance with strict onboarding and review processes can quickly overwhelm a small company and put you at risk. Plus, implementing Silo can reduce the need to hire additional staff to manage compliance obligations and reduce your risk of non-compliance regulatory penalties and continued inspections. No one goes through an inspection or audit with great ease, but several users have reported that their inspections went more smoothly and with Silo they had improved outcomes. Reach out to us today to schedule a demo of Silo.